All right, this is Ubaid on behalf of B Electronics, and in this video, we'll be exploring nominal versus real GDP. Okay, now let me write this down. When it comes to nominal GDP, your nominal GDP is based on the value, the total or final value of all goods and services within an economy. So let's say within a country, within a nation, what have you. Whereas your real GDP is also the final value of all goods and services after adjusting for inflation. So after you made your adjustments for inflation. So after adjusting for inflation. And we know what happens in an inflation. Okay, in an inflated economy, the consumer price index goes up, which means the value of goods and services is devalued. Okay, so this is inflation. And we've talked about, okay, policies or monetary policies that have to do with inflation and deflation. And we know what inflation is all about in general. Okay, now when it comes to your nominal GDP, there's something else you want to keep in mind, and that is this is the final value of all goods and services. Okay, so when it comes to final value, what they mean by that is, for example, if you were to use raw materials, okay, if you were to use raw materials in a product, okay, you only count the value of the finished product. You don't count the value of the raw material and the finished product. Okay, so let's assume this is your finished product over here. Okay, you only count the value of the finished product. So if the finished product is a vehicle, for example, and the value is, suppose the value is 30K, you only count this value over here. Okay, if the raw materials that were used, let's say, okay, your platinum, okay, for your catalytic converter, okay, the platinum was worth $500, and you did include this price over here in your final calculation, you don't count these two, okay? All you do is count the final value of the finished product, which is 30K. Okay, so the retail price of the car. You don't add the retail price of raw materials or the market price of the raw materials to the market price of the car. Okay, and that has to do with the final value. That's the reason why they use the word final value. Okay, so that is raw materials and finished products. And the same thing can be said of a real GDP. In a real GDP, you account for the final value of goods and services. However, the only difference between these two has to do with inflation. Okay, one accounts for inflation, the other one does not account for inflation. So the real GDP will account for inflation, while the nominal GDP will not account for inflation. Okay, and to understand this, let's take an example. Okay, so assuming Okay, a nation produced, okay, 20,000 cars or 20,000 vehicles in general. Okay, you have 20,000 vehicles. Okay, and the price of each vehicle, and let's assume this is one of your ceteris paribus model where all other things are equal, and we're just using a theoretical price to understand the concept. Okay, so in this case, the price of each vehicle was, okay, $10,000, for example. All right, now if you were to figure out the nominal GDP, all you would need to do is multiply the price and the quantity because the nominal GDP is the sum of, okay, quantity and price of different products, of products and services produced within an economy in a given year. So assuming this is your quantity, which is 20,000 vehicles and price is 10,000, all we do is multiply the quantity by price. And this will give us the gross domestic product, the nominal gross domestic product for that particular year. Okay, and let's suppose this year is 2024. So in 2024, and let me use my calculator, this will be 20,000 times this by 10,000. Okay, this will be $200 million. So in 2024, the nominal GDP was $200 million. Okay, however, the same cannot be said for the real GDP because for a real GDP, you have to compare, okay, your quantity with the market price. And the market price will be for a base year, a reference point. Okay, so when it comes to your market price, we're looking at 2002, for example. So if in 2002, okay, the market price of each and every vehicle, and again, this is a theoretical price, was, let's assume this was $9,000 rather than 10,000. Okay, so in that case, what you will do is multiply the quantity of the current year, let's say 2024 or 2025, by the price, the market price in the base year or the reference year. Okay, so that will be 20,000 times that by 9,000. So this will be $180 million. Okay, and notice the difference between the nominal and the real GDP. Okay, because we accounted for inflation, your real GDP is usually less than your nominal GDP for an inflated economy. Okay, so we know that the nominal GDP was 200 million and the real GDP is $180 million. Okay, which means this is a reduction of roughly $20 million if you account for inflation. All right, so that's it for this video. On behalf of Electronics, this is Obey. Have yourself a great day.